This is the BAM School Podcast, where we talk about business adventure and mission with your host, Buddy Rathmel.
All right, so this is going to be my first solo podcast. I was going to title it Talking to Strangers and Adding Value Can Make You Rich, but really I think it's just the value of talking to strangers and adding value. The other night I was at a real estate investors meeting in Roanoke, Virginia, and the lady presenting was talking about how she makes about twice the value of an average rental because she rents per room and not per house. And she just explained all the things that she did. And partway through, she talked about how they're eco-friendly homes, and she had a tenant that offered to pay for the installation of insulation above his room in the attic. And the bill came out to be $1,000, and he said, you know what, I'm just going to cover this whole thing. And everyone else in the room was like, what's his name? I want that tenant. Oh, you're so lucky. And afterwards I was talking to her, and this concept has been in my mind of value and providing value. And I just said to her, well, you led first providing all this value. It's one flat price, utilities, everything's included. They're really nice. It's environmentally friendly. You know, just all these things that she puts into her house. And so she got value back from one of her tenants. And the other thing that I've been thinking about lately is talking to strangers. There was an article in the Atlantic that was titled "The Surprising Benefit of Talking to Strangers." And one of the things that it said was often we feel nervous to approach a stranger or when someone approaches us. But afterwards we're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Actually, it was kind of good. In fact, both people end up generally leaving from a conversation with a stranger feeling better. They thought, oh, I thought that was going to be weird or awkward. And actually it was kind of pleasant or nice, or I learned something. And I've been thinking about those two things: offering value, conversations with strangers. I posted my last post, I think, on Facebook was about a conversation with a couple on the streets of Pass Christian, Mississippi, and how they invited me to their table and bought me a drink. It was a fun hour or 90-minute conversation. And during that conversation, I said, I'd really like to talk to somebody that lives in one of these mansions on the ocean front tomorrow. And so, we left. And the next day, I actually had the opportunity to talk to a guy who lived in one of those mansions. And he was selling some antiques, like high-end antiques. And I just started asking him questions and ended up getting like an hour tour of his place. He took me, it was a 10,000 square foot mansion. He took me through all the rooms, explained what he did, talked about having to fight after Hurricane Katrina to get things rebuilt. I guess the place was condemned by the insurance or somebody. And it was just really fun. It was fascinating. 81-year-old man, and told me about his life, showed me his Salvador Dali's and Picasso's and other artists that he assumed I knew who he was talking about, and I had no clue. But it was really fun just to like hear about his life. And I started thinking about value, and he had listed his mansion for sale for $2.7 million. And he had two full price offers that he turned down. And he said, I don't need the money. I don't need to make another dollar another day in my life. He's 81. Who knows how much longer his life's going to be, but he has another, he said 5,000 square foot house. That's plenty big for one person. But they were offering him full price for the property, $2.7 million. But what he is valuing is that people would get to see and experience this place that he's made and crafted and created, and $45,000 chandeliers. And he doesn't want it to be a home. One of the buyers was a couple, and it was just going to be the two of them. And he's like, I don't want it just for some couple, and they were going to have to scrape together all of their money, to live there. And another was a different gentleman, but neither of them were providing the value that he wanted. So he said no to 2 full price offers. And this week I had the opportunity. I'm in Virginia. So I need to buy a gun, so I fit in here. And I was in the store, and the guy helping me, I just asked him, conversation, is fun. You got to be careful in Virginia. If you're in a hurry and you get in a conversation, it could be a while. And I do believe that I added about 10 minutes to this transaction, by engaging in conversation. But it was really interesting. And, I just asked him what he did and, the different things. Turns out he was a cop and, did all different kinds of things as a cop, including crime scene investigation, and told me about how, after the Virginia Tech shootings, one of his friends, the CSI in Blacksburg, had only graduated from school, or CSI school or whatever, 3 days prior to the shooting. And so he called him up and he was like, yeah, come on down. We could use the help. So basically spent 11 or 13 hours just, doing the crime scene and all that entails. I think in the end, there was something like 33 murders that day. But he talked about, like, some of it was just heartbreaking. He talked about a victim whose cell phone was ringing constantly with dad, on the screen. He could see that it was dad calling, and, I don't know, protocols or whatever. He's not answering the phone and telling him. I don't know who does that or how that works, but he just said just the agony of seeing that go off while he's working the crime scene. And he talked about at the end of the day walking into Cracker Barrel, and got a bit misty as he talked about, as they walked into Cracker Barrel, they haven't eaten since breakfast. It's 9:00 at night, and everyone stands up and claps for them. And the manager comes over and says, "Hey, just want to let you know the meal is on us. Like, no charge. Thanks for your work." And how one day was like the height of his work and what he does, and at the same time, like, the worst day of his whole life. And as I went to, like, pay, he said, "Hey, I'm gonna give you a discount for the work that you've been doing the last few years." And in my mind, I thought, yeah, maybe that's true. Maybe it's the work that we did with Stop Slavery, but I think it's because I sat here and heard your story for 15, 20 minutes and was interesting, was engaged. Like, it wasn't like I was just being there. I think the thing with being interested, asking questions, providing value, is you get a ton of value out of it. Now, I wasn't expecting at all any kind of discount. I just was thinking, hey, it'd be fun to hear this guy's story. It'd be a blessing while we're going through this transaction. And a lot over my life, I realized, like, just by being interested, I've learned a lot, like being curious. I remember as a kid, 18-year-old, sitting at a cafe in Switzerland and hearing a former German soldier talk about how he, because he spoke English, he was sent to the coast of France, and he would listen into English transmissions and, translate those, and what his life was like after the war. And he was telling the story about how he was on a truck, big, like, one of those big deuce and a half military trucks, and he was supposed to take people from wherever they were to another place, but since they didn't know the maps and the signs were all wrong, he was kind of taking them, and he took them through his hometown. And his plan was, when he got to his hometown, he was just going to run away from the truck, and figured they weren't going to do anything to him. But when he stopped and he saw his family and he hugged them and he told them his plan, they're like, "No, get back on the truck. You've got all the food you want, as a prisoner of war. You come here, we have nothing. We don't even have enough for ourselves. So stay in the prisoner of war camp." And so he did. And I was thinking about it as I was walking out of the gun shop. I was thinking, that's really cool. Like, just in offering him value of interest, of being interested in who he was as a person, I got the value of saving $30 on my purchase. And then I thought about it. I actually realized it, not just did I get $30 off of this, but another friend, when I told him I was moving to Virginia, I probably needed to have a gun. Another friend of mine actually bought that gun for me. They said, hey, it was $603 after my discount. And they said, hey, I want to get this for you. I'm sending you $600. And they're like, you can buy a cheap gun and a lot of ammo, a really good gun, not a lot of ammo, whatever. Just $600. Here's a gun to buy. And I realized, I'm like, that is value that I've provided as a friend. And I even told him, I said, listen, I have, I have some money in the bank. I could buy this gun, but I bought an old Fixer Upper, and like any spare dollar I have probably needs to go to that right now. I'm probably not going to buy a gun. And I just think in life, those two things of offering value, like one of the things that Jen and I always say, talk about this idea of helping one another to flourish, like thinking about the other person, what is going to help them to flourish. And I think in conversations, in life, in friendships, in relationships, thinking in terms of how do I provide value? Like, what do I do in this situation, in this circumstance, in this relationship where I can provide more value, and leading with that, I think is always a good thing. Even if there's most of the time, like there's nothing coming back your way, except that it's just a great way to live. And I think we're wired in such a way that as we do that, there's like, it's a part of purpose in our life. I was reading an article this morning that talked about the balance between pleasure and purpose in each of our lives. And sometimes we lean more towards one and sometimes more towards the other. But, and teenagers are the absolute lowest, no surprise, in America on purpose, and high on their pursuit of pleasure. But I think when we are looking to add value, looking to serve others, looking to be a blessing, we get that return in spades. And sometimes I just got a text this afternoon that said, hey, show up for your interview here and bring this and this and do this. And I thought, well, that person's never going to show up for the interview because it wasn't intended for me. So I just wrote him back and said, hey, you got a wrong number. If you have an email address for this person, you might want to reach out to them that way. And they just wrote back and said, hey, thanks so much for responding. Because now they can, hopefully contact this person in some other manner. And I think of that lady who had a tenant buy $1,000 worth of insulation for her property. And it started because she's not thinking, oh, what can I get from my tenants? She's thinking, how can I make their experience great? Like from start to finish, all the things that she thinks about. And she's rewarded by her properties are full. She makes a lot of money. She does well. She actually only lives here in Roanoke like 4 months out of the year. She's on her way to Costa Rica right now. But she's able to live in Costa Rica. Well, one, because it's cheap, and two, because she is providing great value here in Roanoke to people that are living in her apartment building. So anyway, hopefully that encourages you to maybe talk to strangers, maybe offer value in the relationships that you have, and not to do it because there's blessings back to you. But that's something that I've been thinking of lately is a lot of the blessings I've received in life are because I've entered into the relationship or whatever without the thought of what I'm getting back, but just what can I give on the front end? How can I bless this person? What would that look like? And I thought that Jen and I are apart for, I thought 7 weeks, and it turned out through passport and other things, it's going to be a little bit longer. And I was feeling a little bit somber as that reality struck me the other day. And I just had the thought of, ugh, it sounds bad as I'm saying it, but I just had the thought of like, because I've been a person that has offered value, often in conversation, often in relationships, like there's probably 100 people that I could call right now that would be happy to have my call and it would be a fun conversation. And so I saw one, I was looking through Facebook. I'm like, oh, we haven't talked in 4 years. Hit dial, had a fun conversation, followed up with another person that I hadn't talked to probably in 6 months, had a great conversation. But it was just neat to go, you know what, because hopefully at this point in my life, at least, you know, for a chunk of my adult life, I've been focused on how do I add value in relationships that when I call, people pick up the phone and are, you know, happy to talk to me. I know there's some of you out there, you probably wouldn't watch this far if that's not you, but there's probably some of you that would be like, heck to the no, buddy calls me, I'm not picking up. I just want to encourage you, talk to strangers, add value in your relationship. It's a good way to go. So how can this help us in the business context? Well, I had the Facebook post that I referenced earlier. The guy that I met was actually trying to sell his business. He didn't want any down payment for it. It was a business that did pretty well. I would estimate just from the conversation and the vacations that he took, at a bare minimum, he's pulling in $100,000 a year in profit. Probably doing even better than that. But he was willing to give his business away for free to somebody that was willing to work hard to make it happen. The guy that I talked to in his mansion, he actually had a couple businesses that were part of that property that I think under the right circumstances and the right person bringing value, they could potentially walk into that situation without much or any money down at all, given the right set of circumstances. And I think that the way that talking to strangers and adding value can make you rich, I think, is connecting with business owners that are strangers and just going in and saying, hey, is your business for sale? Or calling them up on the phone, asking them questions, finding out, you know, if it is a business for you. And there's actually people that teach this strategy. There's a number of people, Jeremy of the Harbor Club. There's a guy, Carl Allen. I think it's called like Dealmakers Society or something like that. I got a training course years and years ago, 2008, that was all about buying a business with no money out of pocket, whether it's a leveraged buyout or seller financing, talking to the seller and getting the seller to finance. So there's a lot of ways that can happen. Just talking to strangers and finding things out, finding out who might be selling, who would be interested in selling. I'm actually living in a property that I got by calling the lady. The house wasn't for sale. She hadn't listed it, and we got a tremendous deal. I think that I hopefully have I know that I've added a lot of value to her because she's told me that. She's expressed that to me. She added a lot of value to me by giving me a house well under the Zillow listing value for it. I mean, we bought it, we paid for it, but we're both adding a lot of value to one another in the process. I actually purchased it 2.5 months ago, and I think today, hopefully, she's been out of the house for like maybe a little over 3 weeks, and hopefully today she'll have all her stuff off of the grounds, or I'll probably be carting it over in my car to her new place. But yeah, I just want to encourage you, talk to strangers, add value. It's a great way to live.
BAM School, facilitating a global, self-funding, disciple-making movement through business. Thanks for tuning in to the BAM School podcast. Find show notes, free courses, resources, and more at 4bam.com.